I'm back. Hello. 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 Happy Saturday. Hello. Welcome. Welcome all. Welcome all. I'm on one today, so let's just enjoy it for what we should. And we are going to be covering Sydney Powell, but we will be doing another live after, and then we're going to be doing a vertical tonight. So members, be ready for that. Hello. Welcome, everyone. Happy Saturday. It's good to see you all. Boomerang, right at you. I'm right here. I'm right in your face. Fake and all, everything, all of it. Yep. Okay. You're probably like, why are we so aggressive today, right? I got a nasty email last night. Yeah. You know, if you don't know and you haven't watched any of the previous members live, you recently don't know that me and a couple of my friends have been targeted by a predator on the YouTube streets. And so there's a whole other thing to that, right? And so we're going to talk about it. I don't want to make my focus here is true crime, so we're going to focus on the lives, but stay tuned for the verticals. And I have another true crime live planned for tonight. So we're just gonna roll with it. Yeah, we're gonna do it. We are very much so. So hello, happy Saturday. Thank you for being here. We have been covering Sydney Powell case. If you're not familiar, she ended up unaliving her mother with an iron skillet, and she stabbed her 30 times to the neck, arms, to the back. She recently her appeal has been, I'm sorry, I'm being rude. Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Melly, if you didn't already know that. Members, subscribers, likers, trolls, doxers, hello. I'm still here. So we're going to continue to cover true crime. And I hope you like it. And if you don't, well, I'm sorry. You know, you're not supposed to like everything in life. But nonetheless, the Sydney Powell case, her appeal has been approved, that her defense team has filed, basically on grounds that during her trial, it is a mental health case. And so during the trial, her defense team didn't get the opportunity to rebuttal something with one of their medical professionals. And so they filed an appeal and it was approved. And so her conviction is going to be overturned, and we're going to see either a new trial in 2025 or like a plea deal. She'll get some kind of plea deal. She did claim insanity. She does suffer from schizophrenia, and that is the cause allegedly for why she unalived her mother. But if you're not familiar with the case, it's too much to go into now because we're going to read the appeal and we're going to continue to follow up with the testimony. But make sure this is part 4. So you need to go back and watch like all of the parts. But I do have the body cam footage and the crime scene photos. So I hope you can go back and watch that. Let me do like house duties, check in with everyone. Hello, my mods. Thank you for being here. Amazing mods. I saw Corso, Mary D. Hello, my love. I hope you have fun with your friend tonight. I saw Dee Dee in here. I saw Augie. Corso. Hello, Corso. Saw Corso. What's up, Corso? Thank you for being so supportive. Who else? Who else is in here? Fem. Hello, Fem. I saw Gracie. I saw Life Artist. Hello, Life Artist. Thank you, Tipsy. I love you too. And so I'm going to read the appeal. Yeah, you let me know. Let me know what you think about my reading too. I'm interested because I got an email last night that was like trolling me on my reading. And I'm like, wow, I think I have good reading skills. So we're going to have a little fun. Let me know what you think. Hello, Kenzie Kush. Augie's like, excuse me. Oh yeah, don't act like you don't know. Hello, Paul T. It was a crazy overreaction to getting kicked out of college. Right. Hello, Stormy. Good to see you. Yay! Woo woo! Miss Shorty in the house. What's up, Miss Shorty? Good to see you, girl. I love me some Shorty. Hello, Mystique. Good to see you. Juicer. Hello, love. Okay. I see all of you. So if you're not down for me reading documents, well, suck it up or don't. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you, but we're going to read the documents because we come with the facts here. Melly, you're a fantastic reader. I've seen you. I hope so. If not, well, like I said, suck it up. I have the document right here on the screen for you guys. We're gonna read through it. It's Sydney Nicole Powell, December 26th. This is the appeal that it's gonna grant her a new trial. Sydney Powell appears to convictions in Summit County Court of Common Pleas. This court reverses. Hello, Unique Prepping, and hello, Killa Swag. Don't come. Don't come. That's right. I made an emoji, I'll say, and I don't know if you saw it. A member's emoji that says "Don't come for me." I have to make it a little bigger. Pause. But yes, I will work on that. Let's continue. After I'm done reading this appeal, we're going to watch her grandmother testify. So if you missed out on, again, parts 1 through 4, well, this is 4, but 1 through 3, catch up. Catch up, if you know the reference I'm making. After graduating high school, Ms. Powell enrolled as a first-year student at Mount Union College. Mount Union placed her on an academic probation for her first year after her academic performance did not improve. She was placed on academic suspension after the first semester of the second year. Ms. Powell did not tell her family or friends. Instead, she returned to campus in January and moved into her residence hall as nothing had happened. And after Ms. Powell's sorority president questioned why her name did not appear on a membership roster, the Associate Dean of Students contacted Ms. Powell. Although Ms. Powell initially denied that she was suspended, she eventually acknowledged she was aware of the suspension. The Associate Dean set a timeline for Ms. Powell to move out of the residence hall, and Ms. Powell agreed. When the deadline passed, however, the Associate Dean learned that Ms. Powell was still living in the residence hall. During a second meeting between the official Ms. Powell and the Vice President, Student of Affairs, Ms. Powell acknowledged that she was required to move out, stated that her parents were aware of her suspension, and represented that she just needed more time to do so. Yet again, Ms. Powell did not move out by the deadline. When staff approached her in the residence hall, she refused their offer to contact her parents and moved out her belongings immediately. Over the next week, Ms. Powell stayed in local hotels, visited her home with her parents were not there, and sent text messages to friends. On the evening of March 2nd, 2020, Ms. Powell returned to campus and watched The Bachelor with her friends. When Ms. Powell returned to Mount Union in January, her father, SP, Stephen Powell, noticed that he could not access the parent financial portal. When he asked Ms. Powell about the problem, she told him that she could take care of it. On the morning of March 3rd, 2020, the date of the crime, SP received a call at work from Mount Union informing him that Ms. Powell was no longer enrolled and directing him to Ms. Powell for further information. Using a location sharing app on his smartphone, SP noted that Ms. Powell was at home at a time she should not have been there. He left his phone at work so that Ms. Powell could not track his location and drove to his home where he found Ms. Powell. During that conversation that followed, Ms. Powell expressed frustration that her friends seemed to have figured out their lives while she had not. SP urged her to talk to her mother, BP. One of them contacted BP, who told her coworkers that she needed to go home to deal with a problem involving her daughter. SP returned to work before BP arrived. At 12:36 p.m., BP sent him a text to confirm that she was pulling into the driveway. So if you're confused, Sydney unalived her mother in the kitchen with an iron skillet and a steak knife over her grades. She was living a second or double life. She had failed school. She was going to this university and she was failing and having issues. And so allegedly she has mental health issues, and this is what made her have a snap moment. And so this is why we're reading the appeal today. And I'm sorry, I'm missing some of you. Hello, Amanda, good to see you. And so let's continue. On March 3rd, 2020, the Dean of Students at Mount Union received a message that BP had called to discuss Ms. Powell. The note that the message was written on also said that Ms. Powell was sitting next to BP when she called. The Dean asked the Associate Dean to join him for a telephone conversation with BP. BP is Brenda Powell, the mother, and they returned the call from the office. Brenda answered the phone and they identified themselves. The conversation did not progress any further. At that point, they heard a thump or a thud that was accompanied by a large scream. After that, they heard an explosion of air, like the air was knocked out of somebody. The sound of the phone falling to the ground and a number of thumping sounds that went on for maybe 15 seconds or so. They heard crying, and screaming that seemed to get further away and then to approach the phone again, followed by sounds like a hard item hitting something. When the call dropped, they tried to call back. On the third attempt, with about 1.5 minutes later, a very calm voice answered, but the dean recognized that it was not the person he had spoken to before. When he addressed Ms. Powell by name, the call dropped. The associate dean contacted Akron Police Department directly to avoid being routed through Stark County's 911 system, and officers were dispatched for a welfare check at Ms. Powell's residence in response. At 12:51 p.m., SP received a call from his lifelong friend, Detective Kenneth Dice. Detective Kenneth Dice had recognized SP's address in radio traffic, and he informed SP that the officers had been dispatched to his home for a welfare check. SP attempted to reach BP unsuccessfully, but he did speak with Miss Powell, who told him that BP was on the phone with officials from the Mount Union. So Miss Powell's Sydney. When Stephen told her that police were on their way to the house, Sydney lost her composure and told him that someone had broken into the house. When the officers arrived, they heard a woman crying for help. In the back of the house, they found that a window was open, a sliding glass door was ajar, and there appeared to be blood on vertical blinds. One of the officers found Miss Powell, who was yelling, Sydney, as her mother was in the back of the house. According to their testimony, Sydney told them that after hearing the noise, her mother told her to leave the house. She told officers that when she heard screaming, she went inside and found her mother on the floor. The officer noted that Miss Powell had cuts on her own hand that were actively bleeding. The officer found Brenda in a bedroom lying face up on the floor. A cell phone, a large cast iron skillet, and a knife were found near her body. Brenda Powell died as a result of her injuries. So we covered all of that already. We're just reading through appeal. We're going to see why she gets a new trial that we might be watching. Us true crime junkies. Hello, my beautiful Mo. And hello, Chicken Nugget. Wait, did I see Chicken Nugget? Yes, hello, Chicken Nugget. I don't eat chicken nuggets, but I love Chicken Nugget here. Miss Powell provided her name to the officers outside the house, then dropped to the pavement and stopped answering questions. Although she was transported to the hospital by EMS, Miss Powell quickly became a suspect in Brenda Powell's death. She was involuntarily admitted to Akron General until March 16, 2020, after an emergency psychiatric evaluation. Ms. Powell was charged with 2 counts of murder and 1 count of each felonious assault and tampering with evidence, and she entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. Before trial, Ms. Powell moved the trial court to permit her to call witnesses to rebut the state's anticipated expert testimony related to the NGRI defense. The trial court denied the motion during trial, but before the state's expert testified. After the state's experts testified, Ms. Powell renewed the motion, arguing that her experts could have rebutted the specific points related to the methodology used and conclusion reached by the state's expert. The trial court denied the motion again, concluding that Ms. Powell had lots and lots of expert testimony in this matter. The jury found that Ms. Powell guilty of all the charges against her. The trial court determined that the 2 counts of murder and the count of felonious assault were allied offenses, and the trial court sentenced her to an aggregate prison term of 15 years to life. Ms. Powell appealed, assigning 4 errors for this court's review. Ms. Powell's first assignment of error raises 2 arguments regarding the presentation of evidence to rebut the testimony of the state's expert witness, that the trial court erred by denying her pretrial motion, and that the trial court erred by refusing to permit rebuttal after the state's experts testified. This court agrees in part. The sanity of a criminal defendant is an affirmative defense, not an element of the charge offense. State versus Garrett. A person is not guilty by reason of insanity only if the person proves that at the time of the commission of the offense, the person did not know, as a result of severe mental disease or defect, the wrongfulness of the person's act. Because the defendant must prove not guilty by reason of insanity by a preponderance of the evidence, the proper standard for determining whether a defendant has successfully demonstrated this defense and is thus entitled to a not guilty by reason of insanity instruction is whether he has introduced sufficient evidence, which, if believed, would raise a question in the mind of a reasonable person concerning the existence of the issue. So basically, she got diagnosed with schizophrenia after she killed her mother. And so she got 15 years to life, the ability to parole after 15 years. And they're allegedly one of their professionals wasn't able to do this, what we're reading here. And so that's why she's going to be granted a second trial. Revised Code section explains the order for the presentation of evidence in a trial. After opening statements, the party who would be defeated if no evidence were offered on either side first shall produce that party's evidence, and the adverse party shall then produce the adverse party's evidence. After each party presents its case in chief, the party shall then be confined to rebutting the evidence unless the court, for good reasons and in furtherance of justice, permits them to offer evidence in their original cases. Because it is an affirmative defense, Sydney Powell bore the burden of demonstrating that she was not guilty by reason of insanity by preponderance of the evidence. Not guilty by reason of insanity was an issue on which Ms. Powell would be defeated if no evidence were offered on either side. For purposes of not guilty by reason of insanity, the appropriate time of Ms. Powell to present her evidence was during her own case in chief. After Ms. Powell's case in chief, the state could present both rebuttal evidence with respect to its own case in chief as the adverse party with respect to not guilty by reason of insanity. The state could also present its own evidence on that issue. After that, Ms. Powell could present rebuttal evidence on the issue of not guilty by reason of insanity. Consequently, as a substance of Ms. Powell's argument recognizes, the question before this court is not whether the trial court abused its discretion by denying her the ability to present rebuttal evidence, but whether the trial court erred by concluding that she could not present rebuttal evidence in the first instance. So for those of you who have been here for parts 1 through 3, do you think she is insane? Do you think she suffers? Clearly, she was diagnosed. We've had this discussion many times here on my channel before, where we talk about like nurture versus nature. Are people born evil or do they become evil, right? And this is a great question for this case. It's like we see the mental health aspect of it and we're all being very open and understanding to it, but we saw her stage the scene as well. So do you think she's insane or do you not? And so do you think she deserves a second trial or do you not? I mean, we would be the people, like it's trial by jury. So I feel like, what do you think? You guys saw the body cam footage, so I know a lot of you know. Oh, okay, so I hear you. She was clearly not insane. 𝗟𝗄𝗃 says, I'm still leaning forward. She knew what she was doing. She had no self-control or emotional regulation. I'm still open-minded about it though. So like, what did her mom say? We saw how brutal it was. We saw the crime scene photos. And so what did her mom say that tipped her off, right? We saw that one of the psychologists was saying that it had been building up and that she had been experiencing these mental health issues for months, right? Prior to starting school. So no second trial. You think she's going to get a plea deal? I think she'll get a plea deal. Let's move on. Rebutting evidence is that given to explain, refute, or disprove new facts introduced into evidence by the adverse party. It becomes relevant only to challenge the evidence offered by the opponent and its scope limited by such evidence. To be presented as rebuttal evidence, testimony must meet 2 criteria. It must be a matter that was first addressed in the opponent's case in chief, and it should not be a matter brought into the rebutting party's case in chief. When both criteria are met, a party has an unconstitutional right to present rebuttal testimony. A party need not preemptively counter an opponent's argument. However, consequently, when an opposing expert offers an alternative explanation, it becomes material after that expert testifies and is a proper subject of rebuttal testimony. This is true regardless of whether the explanation offered by the expert was also posed as a theory during cross-examination of another expert. In her case in chief, Sydney Powell presented the testimony of 3 expert witnesses. After each expert testified, the state conducted a brief cross-examination. Dr. James Reardon, who practices forensic psychology, testified that he met Sydney on 2 dates for 8 to 10 hours of evaluation, and he described the psychological assessments that he administered to her. Dr. Reardon explained that the psychological assessments function as a check on the individual performing the evaluation, and he explained that he would not be comfortable diagnosing a severe mental disease without conducting assessments. I'm sorry, I need to zoom in. As a result of this evaluation, Dr. Reardon determined that at the time of the murder, Sydney was suffering from the first episode of schizophrenia and a major depressive disorder single episode, which he characterized as both severe and accompanied by both psychotic features. Dr. Reardon testified that at the time she committed the murder, Ms. Powell was in a psychotic state or, quote unquote, out of touch with reality and unable to know the wrongfulness of her acts. Dr. Reardon further explained that her schizophrenic and psychotic episode was preceded by early indicators of an onset that can be noted in retrospect, but that would have been difficult to detect at the time. These included a deteriorating connection to reality over the 6-month period of time before the murder, decreased concentration, social withdrawal, and depressed mood. Dr. Reardon opined that by the time that Ms. Powell returned to campus in January of 2020, she was, quote unquote, on a real slippery slope in terms of her mental health and emotional state deteriorating, and noted that she was well on her way to a final psychological decline that was ultimately precipitated by Mount Union's action. He explained that in the week before the murder, Sydney actively manifested auditory hallucinations and exhibited behavior inconsistent with normal functioning. According to his testimony, Ms. Powell was departing further and further from reality and decompensating into a full-blown psychotic state. At that point, and by the time she arrived at her home on the date of the murder, she was, quote unquote, in the midst of a full-blown psychotic episode. Dr. Reardon testified that the manner of Brenda Powell's death influenced his opinion about whether Sydney Powell appreciated the wrongfulness of her conduct, noting that it demonstrated the incredible magnitude of the loss of reality and the loss of any ability to engage in any reasonless or conscious thought during those moments. Dr. Thomas Swales, a forensic neuropsychologist employed by the Cuyahoga County Court of Common Pleas psychiatric clinic, also testified as an expert for Ms. Powell. Dr. Swales explained that he based his evaluation on Ms. Powell on a structured clinical interview, a format in which he has tested against other psychiatrists using the same tools to see if we can come up with the same answers. He opined at the time of the offense that Sydney was suffering from a first episode of schizoaffective disorder, bipolar type, and was in an acute state that impacted her ability to know the wrongfulness of her actions. According to Dr. Swales, Ms. Powell was living a delusion and was completely and totally out of her mind. I'm so curious what you guys think, because you know, if you've been here for part 1, 2, and 3, we saw all the body cam footage. We saw all of it, right? So as we read this appeal, we think this person is going to either be set free or in a mental hospital, or she gets a second trial over grades. 𝗂𝗄𝗄 says, I'm learning towards she knew what she was doing, no self-control or emotional regulation. I'm still open-minded about, though. I agree. Evil and mentally also not a good mix. Great. I can give you some examples of that. Please hit the like button, everyone. Yes, please hit the like button. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. I hope my reading's okay. Do you approve? Do you approve? She gave an argument for second trial, even though to introduce a plea due to mental, whatever you want to call it, when she actively broke a window and claimed a break-in. We saw it all adding up. So let's move on. With respect to malingering, Dr. Swales acknowledged that Ms. Powell was slightly over the threshold score for possible malingering on the Miller Forensic Assessment of Symptoms test, but he explained that the assessment is not a diagnostic tool. Dr. Swales also administered the structured interview of reported symptoms, second edition, the medical symptom validity test, and the nonverbal medical symptom validity test. He testified that malingering was not indicated as a result of those assessments with a high degree of certainty, and noted that a diagnosis of malingering in this case would not make sense. Dr. Swales also noted that he could not diagnose malingering, I hope I'm saying that right, I'm sorry, without administering those diagnostic assessments. Ms. Powell's third expert witness was Dr. Robin Belcher Timmy. Time? Question mark. A licensed psychologist with an independent practice in forensic psychology. Dr. Time, I'm going to call him Time, spent approximately 5 hours conducting a clinical forensic interview of Sydney, and he administered the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory 3rd edition and the Miller Forensic Assessment symptoms test to her. He testified that at the time of the murder, Sydney was suffering from a first episode of acute schizoaffective disorder, depressive disorder, and that her symptoms were so severe that she did not appreciate the wrongfulness of her actions. He characterized Ms. Powell's condition on that date as a first episode psychosis and acknowledged that her case was atypical because she did not have a long history of psychosis and the indicators of future violent behavior were absent. With respect to her behavior prior to the murder, Dr. Tᕗ explained that when somebody is psychotic, it is a symptom to not believe you are psychotic. He testified that Ms. Powell's first semester at Mount Union was characterized by social anxiety, followed by separation from reality that developed over time to that point where she's created a separate reality and has untethered from the world as we all know it. Nothing that the state expert analyzed Ms. Powell's cellular usage from the week before the murder. Dr. Tᕗ explained that psychosis manifests and abates over time, offering opportunities for her to desperately hold on to some sense of normalcy in her life. Dr. Tᕗ explained that Sydney Powell's behavior after the murder could be explained by the fact that she remained in a psychotic state or in the alternative, and that she was experiencing moments of lucidity that induced a trauma response. So again, I couldn't list a ton of information out of that, but do you believe Sydney was in a psychosis? Dr. Tᕗ testified that Ms. Powell's medical records from the weeks after the murder indicate that those who treated her uniformly recognized that she was suffering from a severe mental illness. He also testified that Ms. Powell's score on the Miller Forensic Assessment of Symptoms test fell below the threshold that suggests the presence of malingering, and that he did not observe indications of malingering during his evaluation. He also emphasized that because of the consequences of being characterized as a malingerer are so serious, he would not make that a diagnosis without administering diagnostic assessments. The state called a single expert witness, Dr. Sylvia, to testify regarding the not guilty by reason of insanity defense. The expert report that Dr. 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 prepared reviewed Ms. Powell's recent social history in conjunction with collateral records that included her cellular phone usage and academic records from Mount Union. Dr. 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲's report noted that during the 2 hours that she spent interviewing Sydney was less than honest and forthcoming. Dr. 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 observed that Ms. Powell tended to respond vaguely, omit or distort relevant details, or assert that she was unable to remember or did not know the information that might reflect her in an unfavorable light. Dr. 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 also noted that Sydney tended to exaggerate or feign having symptoms of a severe mental health illness that she claimed rendered her unable to function. In the course of the report, Dr. 𝗟𝗏𝗏𝗏 summarized Ms. Powell's cellular activity during the week that preceded the murder and the information gained during the police investigation, and that Sydney's medical records. Dr. 𝗟𝗏𝗏𝗏 opined that Ms. Powell did not meet the criteria for a severe mental illness at the time of the murder, and that her symptom presentation is not credible, and that she appreciated the wrongfulness of her actions at the time of the murder. Dr. 𝗟𝗏𝗏𝗏's report did not explain her methodology into detail or comment on the methodology employed by Ms. Powell's experts. So the state had a mental health professional that didn't believe she was insane or experiencing psychosis, but her defense team claims that she was schizophrenic and she was in a mental hospital for, time after the crime. So it's like back and forth, right? Yay, Milliverse. He strongly believed her mental health took over her free will. Interesting. Right. I guess I've probably seen similar to imprints are seen as a word. Right. Hello. Yes. Hello, Laura. Did I say hi? Hello. So the expert said she did have lucid moments. Yes. Well, there was two that claimed she did, and the state didn't believe she did. Hello, Yashira. Good to see you. During her testimony, Dr. 𝗟𝗏𝗏𝗏 summarized the conclusions contained in her report. She also distinguished her methodology from the methodology employed by Sydney's expert, explaining that the clinical work, you take what's reported to you and you just assume that it's 100% honest. There's no reason to lie. She then noted that her approach was slightly different. I took everything that was reported to me. I compared it with things that we knew to be true, and it did not add up to schizophrenia or insanity at the time of the crime. Dr. 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 explained that she examined Sydney's cellular phone records because the best source of information for an insanity evaluation is all of the data and evidence for that time frame. So the best way to know what someone's mental state is by the things they were doing and saying at that time. Dr. 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 explained that she did not administer any assessments to Ms. Powell because they would be irrelevant to determining her mental state at the time the murder was committed. During cross-examination, Dr. 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 reiterated that a present mental health problem has no bearing on mental status at the time the crime is committed. She also summarized the difference between her methodology and methodology employed by Sydney's experts. Question. Okay, so Dr. Swells, Dr. Rodden, and Dr. Time, they have combined 50 years experience. Combined, they did 25 different psychological tests, and they are saying to this jury, you are not taking issue with the way they scored those tests. Answer. No, my issue is it's what's been given. When you have data, you have to determine how important and how credible that data is. And so your difference of opinion is clear, but I think the approach was also pretty different, which is what my investigation and all of the time for the evaluation was spent on the period of the crime. Whereas they took lots and lots of data from the time of the period of meeting with her, which, unfortunately is not the most relevant data. Yeah, you're saying she was malingering and that these 3 doctors missed it. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the 3 doctors focused and believed everything she said. And I compared everything she said to what we know to be true, and it didn't match. Regarding the administration of assessments designed to diagnose malingering, am I saying that right? Dr. 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 opined that assessments can only diagnose malingering at the moment the test is given, and that no assessment can indicate past malingering. I have to look that up. Dr. 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲's testimony, therefore, did not only describe her conclusions about whether Sydney met the criteria for not guilty by reason of insanity. Without question, Dr. 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 disagreed with Sydney's experts on that ultimate issue. Her testimony went beyond that question, however. She also described her own methodology and offered pointed critique of Ms. Powell's experts, characterizing the basis of her expert opinions as both fundamentally flawed and irrelevant to the question at hand. These matters were addressed for the first time in the state's case in chief regarding not guilty by reason of insanity, and testimony rebutting these arguments would not have merely reiterated matters brought into Sydney's case in chief. Ms. Powell was not required to preemptively counter these arguments. Considering that Dr. 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 did not include the critique in her expert report and the state's cross-examination of each expert was minimal, it may have been well impossible for Sydney to do so in any event. Ms. Powell's proffered rebuttal, therefore, would have been evidence given to explain, refute, or disprove new facts introduced into evidence. The trial court denied Sydney motions based solely on the conclusion that there had been lots and lots of expert testimony in this matter. Under these circumstances, however, Ms. Powell had an unconditional right to present rebuttal testimony. This court therefore agrees that once the state's expert had testified, the trial court erred by denying her opportunity to present rebuttal testimony on not guilty of reason of insanity. Ms. Powell's first assignment of error is sustained on the basis of convictions were against the manifest weight of evidence. Ms. Powell's right to a fair trial under the 6th and 14th Amendment in Ohio Constitution was violated when the prosecutor made improper remarks and solicited testimony regarding her desire to consult counsel. The trial court committed prejudicial error when it denied Sydney's motion in limine and permitted gruesome photos and testimony regarding the victim's cause and manner of death, which were not in dispute. We saw those pictures in part 1, so make sure you watch that and go back and review. Ms. Powell's second assignment of error is that her convictions are against the manifest weight of the evidence. Her third assignment of error argues that the state engaged in misconduct by commenting on her desire to remain silent after her arrest. And her fourth assignment of error argues that the trial court erred by admitting evidence that was irrelevant or unduly prejudicial. In the light of this court's resolution, her first assignment of error, her second and third and fourth assignments are moot. Ms. Powell's first assignment error is sustained. Her second, third, and fourth assignment of error are moot. The judgment of the Summit County Court of Common Pleas is reversed, and this matter is remanded to the trial court for proceedings consistent with this opinion. There were reasonable grounds for this appeal. We order a special mandate issue out of this court directing the Court of Common Pleas, County of Summit, State of Ohio, to carry the judgment into execution. A certified copy of this journal shall constitute the mandatory, so it's basically saying it's granted. The Court of Clerk of Appeals is instructed to mail a notice signed December 26, 2024. So she gets a new a new trial, or she's going to take a plea deal. So now we're going to watch, we just wanted to get through the appeal, and now we're going to watch her grandmother testify. We have been watching all of it the last few lives that we've done. So let me make sure. Let me pull up the right screen so we can get to it. We're going to listen to the grandmother and the teacher testify. So we're continuing from part 3.
Let's talk about Brenda, if we could, for a second. What kind of person was Brenda?
Brenda was the sweetest child, always respectful. The story.
I know you're like, Melanie, why are you moving so fast? We just read the appeal, and now we're going back and catching up on the trial. I've been playing the most critical points of it because we weren't able to see it all. Hello, YouTube Streets. Hello. Shout out to YouTube Streets in the house. So this is the grandmother testifying.
I always said about them when they were kids was the only time that she was ever the one in trouble was if she got between me and my son when I was trying to get to him. And it was just, she just was always a good child. Very gentle, very loving. You really never heard a raised voice or anything from her. She dedicated her life after college to advocating for children at Akron Children's Hospital on the oncology hematology floor. And I was amazed that she was able to stay on that same floor for so many years, because it's such a difficult thing when children are ill and when children die. And she stayed all those years with it. Many Christmas Eves that she would call and say, Mom, I'm just going to have to go back to the hospital because some of the children don't have family coming in and I want to be there for them. So she did. She always was with us on Christmas Day, but she sometimes didn't make it for Christmas Eve. But she was, I'm sorry, am I taking
okay. No,
she was always the organizer and the family gatherer. And Bob and I went to Disney World with them, and she made all the plans, and she would call me to ask me, is this okay and is that okay? And I said, Brenda, just give me the dollar amount at the end and I'm happy. So she planned everything, and it was wonderful because we would have never planned a trip like that on our own. So yes, that was my daughter.
Okay, thank you. What kind of mom was she?
She was a wonderful mom. She worried
she's
about her
talking
kids
about Brenda.
all the time. And probably one of the reasons she waited a little longer than some to have children is because of what she had seen in the hospital. But we were just thrilled when they announced that they were pregnant. And from day one, she just was wonderful with the kids. Both of them. Steve was wonderful with them too as they got older and played out in the yard and so forth. He was always we had a lot of picnics at our place on the weekends, and the two of them were outside with the kids all the time, or sitting on the swing. I have a vision in my mind of the two of them I've got a bench swing that my husband built, and the two of them are sitting on the swing. But they're both sitting in the middle, side by side. There was room for other people on both ends. They didn't have to squeeze in, but they did. That was their natural state.
Yeah, say a little more, if you could, about the relationship that you saw between Brenda and Sydney. What was that like?
Well, that's what I say. She was just they were always side by side. She was very proud of her. She went to all of her soccer games, all of them. I offered to buy her one of those little huts that are see-through, so in the cold weather she could sit in it. She says, Mom, I'm not going to sit in that. But anyways, we went to some of the games that were closer to us that we could go see. But she just loved to do that. They did everything together. They took us for a girls' day and took me to a tea room, someplace up here somewhere, and for lunch. And I mean, it was just always Sydney and Brenda that were together.
So
And
sad.
I assume you guys got together for milestones, first communion, graduation.
First communion,
Like
confirmation, graduation.
Turn on. Thank you.
Dizzy's like, invite
So I'm
me.
going to show you what we marked as defendant's exhibit. Sorry.
You want some tea, girl?
I know it's
I
not
got
order.
some tea for
That's
you.
my fault. Thanks. What is that, Ms. Brown?
That's us, I think, at her graduation, at Sydney's graduation. Is that what it is? She's got a,
So she's got the St. B colors on and the cap and gown?
yeah.
Who are those folks in that picture?
Her brother Andrew, my husband, Sydney, and I.
Okay. Let me show you defendant's exhibit Y. Who are those folks?
That's Sydney and her other set of grandparents, Michelle and Ron.
Okay. And just
We
very
learned
briefly,
from my
defendant's
parents.
exhibit Z. This is Sydney's ID from 2020.
Yes,
And Sydney's listed at 5'1", 100 pounds. Is that what she weighed and her height around March of 2020?
yes.
Okay. What about in high school, before Sydney went to Mount Union? What kind of student was she? What kind of grades did she get, if you know?
She was an excellent student and just involved in school. She enjoyed school.
She was involved in any sports?
Soccer.
Convention
Yeah.
soccer?
She was
And was Sydney ever in
Captain.
trouble in school? Any suspensions, any fights, anything like that?
No,
Was she the kind of kid that had a temper, a short fuse, would yell, argue?
no.
What kind of kid was Sydney?
Sydney was always a sweet child. She was a lot like her mother in that she was quiet spoken most of the time. We laughed and so forth, but she was.
I'm sorry, you guys saw the crime scenes. I have to pause because if you didn't see, she stabs her mother 30 times. So for those of us who cover true crime, like that's an overkill, right? So whether it was psychosis or not, like the brutality of it, I can't like ignore that, right? And so I feel like living in a hotel, making up the scene, breaking into the windows, like was she really losing her shit? Or was she didn't want her mom to know she was failing, right? And like, is failing grades that bad? Like, is it worth, you're going to be in prison? Is it worth it? Like, it's a brutal crime. So make sure you watch part 1 so you can see the crime scene photos.
a worrier, a little bit of a worrier.
Stabbing is so
And,
personal. In the
A
neck,
child worrier
washing
type
someone's
things, like
throat.
worrying about overrunning
Brutal.
a bucket in the barn or something.
It's very personal.
But,
It's very much overkill.
Other than that, she was always sweet and kind.
In my opinion, allegedly, in my opinion.
They also spent a lot of time doing puzzles
Don't come for
together
me.
and, quiet time that they spent together.
Did you ever see or hear about Sydney and Brenda fighting or arguing or talking disrespectful to each other?
No, never.
So let's talk for a second about March 3rd of 2020. Did you hear from Brenda that morning?
Yes, I did.
Can you describe that?
Yes, I had a phone call from Brenda while she was on her way to work. And I thank God I picked up the phone, it was with the phone. But she just chatted a little bit about Sydney coming home. And the plans over the break that they were planning to go shopping. And we talked a little bit about whether I could meet them part way and go too. And then that was it. She had to run into work. So.
Okay. So I think we heard that, I think spring break was coming up for Mount Union.
Yes.
And was Brenda mad at Sydney? Was she upset?
No.
Looking
No.
forward to her coming home?
Yes.
Okay. And you were present at the hospital, I believe, when Sydney was at Akron City Hospital. Detective Bertina King was there. Do you recall that?
Yes, actually, I was at the hospital much earlier than that. And they told me that she was not there.
Okay.
Then eventually, it seemed like forever, Steve called and told us to go to a different hospital. So we all piled in the car, and his brother drove us over to the other hospital, which was apparently where Brenda was.
Okay.
They refused to let me see her at all, and still weren't giving out any information. But after we were there for a while, they sent us back over to the original hospital. And I'm sorry, I can't give you the names.
That's
of
okay.
which is
All right.
which right now. But
Yay.
it turns out Sydney was at the hospital where they had us waiting all afternoon. And the detective lady met us in the lobby then, and I knew when she took us to a room instead of up to see Sydney that this wasn't going to end well.
Yeah.
So she spent the first few minutes getting her little recording device on.
Well, let me stop you there before we get into what Detective King said. That's okay. I think what I was trying to get at, and I
Yay,
apologize,
Q-Baby.
is Sydney was
Yay.
released from the hospital, and then she
Glad you're
was
here.
taken to the Summit County Jail and charged with Brenda's murder. You remember that?
Yes, and I don't know exactly when that took place.
Okay, that's fine. What I was
All right,
trying to
fine.
get to is within a day or two, Sydney's bond was posted.
Yes,
Is that a decision that you and the family supported?
absolutely.
Okay. And Sydney was released from the Summit County Jail and I think went to the Akron General Medical Center Psychiatric Hospital.
Yes.
So this cute little grandmammy, she had Sydney living in her house after she unalived her own daughter. So this is Brenda Powell's mother. You also have to consider that, right? Consider that factor. We all want to make a judgment on like whether it was mental health and illness. She lost her shit. We don't know, right? But the fact that her grandmother was like okay with having her there and supported her, that also speaks volumes, right? And her family has been supportive to her all along. But if someone just stabbed my daughter to death, I don't know that I would be so comfortable with sleeping with that same person under the roof. I know that sounds judgmental, or maybe like I'm not being very nice, but I feel like it's a lot, right? It's a lot to handle. So we like grandmammy. We like her.
And I think we heard
You
she was
do.
there from March 7th through March 16th. Does that sound
Correct.
about
Yes.
okay? All right. And
Love can be blind.
you were aware,
It's
or
true.
were you aware of a diagnosis that Sydney
Right.
had when she came out of Akron General Medical Center?
Yes.
What was it?
This grandma did. She had her there
Schizophrenia.
for
Okay.
months.
And there were
months.
some other, I think, things to be checked out.
Okay. And the decision was made to have Sydney stay with you after she was released.
Yes.
Why was that?
Well, first of all, Sydney was still, I think, very shocky and upset. Of
Thank you.
course, I was still grieving. I felt
Means a lot.
all along that
So,
my Sydney couldn't have been in her right.
Objection. We understand. Just let me ask you this.
Anyways, we did it
That's
to
okay.
take Sydney to my home where I would be with her all the time.
thank you, Carson.
Okay, and let me
And-
try to help a little bit. You weren't working at that time?
No,
Yeah. And was Bob working?
No.
Do anything for your family?
Describe your house for the jury, if you could.
I would.
What is your home like?
I don't know.
We live on a farm. We've got over 100 acres, and so we kind of sit
I love
back
you, Dee Dee.
by ourselves. It's
Thank you.
a nice home. It's over 100 years old, but it's quiet, and I have animals, which Sydney has quite an affinity to, and I just felt it would be a good environment for her.
Okay. And you knew that Sydney was supposed to take some medication when she got out of Akron General Medical Center. You aware of
Yes,
that? Okay.
yes,
When Sydney first got out, was she taking her medication?
yes.
Can you describe, if you noticed, what effect did the medication
Randall.
have on Sydney in the beginning for the first few months?
Yeah.
I felt that she was still a bit, I don't know how to describe it, maybe glazed over a little bit. She took it like clockwork, but I felt that it was dragging her down a little bit until she adapted to it.
So was there a routine where Sydney would take her medication at the same time or same day?
She takes it at the same time every single day.
And did there come a time where you noticed any improvement in Sydney's kind of demeanor, her attitude, her personality, her thinking, her process, any of that?
Yes, her processing was improving. She started to have more facial expression and a little bit more shine to her eyes, where she didn't seem so out of it all the time. It wasn't that she was out of it. I don't want to overspeak that, but she just had more of a glow to her. You could tell she was starting to feel better. She talked a little more. She was improving. It was obvious to me that she was improving.
Okay. And Sydney had a
We
counselor
have some
during this
stuff
whole
to talk
time?
about.
Yes.
And was she compliant? Was she seeing her counselor as well?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Were there times where
We're going to talk about the
Sydney
mental
would
health
experience
later.
some breakthrough symptoms?
In a
She
vertical.
did have an episode apparently where she felt that she was having some symptoms again, and she reported it immediately to her therapist and was advised to, I don't know if the therapist called the doctor or if Sydney called the doctor right now. But the psychiatrist was notified immediately, and he changed her medication. And that made a huge difference after that. She reported to me that her symptoms were settling down again. She wasn't hearing so many noises. And I could just tell a whole difference in her demeanor at that point, where she really was starting to be Sydney again.
Okay. So Sydney has spent just about every day with you since March 16, 2022.
Yes.
Do you think she's faking a serious mental illness?
Do you think she's faking it? Wow.
Is she responding to changes in the medication?
No,
Yes.
Hello, good to see you.
So we were coming up to this trial date, and did you have any conversations with the therapist or the psychiatrist about how Sydney might try to deal with the stress of a trial?
Yes.
And what was done, if anything, that you know of?
He did make another adjustment on a temporary basis to help her with anxiety.
And that's her psychiatrist?
Yes, the psychiatrist.
Do you know his name by chance?
Yes, Dr. Smartnick.
Been her psychiatrist since
From the
from
beginning,
the very
yes.
So let me try to ask the question we've heard from Mr. Stano many times. I know you're not a psychologist, But have you seen signs and symptoms of mental health issues with Sydney?
Yes.
And you know Sydney, you know Brenda. Do you believe, Mrs. Brown, that Sydney would kill Brenda because she was suspended from Mount Union?
Objection. I'm going to sustain that objection as well.
Mrs. Brown, I don't have any further questions.
Okay.
There might be some, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Hang
hold on.
1 second.
Hold
Yeah,
on.
there might be some from the
Prosecutor may have
prosecutor.
some questions.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right.
Leave Grandma alone. There we go.
Mr. McLeod's cross-examination.
Yes, good morning, Ms. Brown.
Good morning.
My name is Joe McLeod. I know you've been here most of trial and you've seen me ask some questions to other witnesses. And I promise, sir, I can
Right, Carrie.
tell you just have a few questions. But like I've said to other witnesses, if I ask something that you don't understand or you need clarifying, you just let me know, okay? I want to first talk about Brenda. We've heard from her coworkers, we've heard from you, we've heard from Mr. Powell. Brenda was very good at her job. Would you agree?
Yes.
She found a career that fit her calling very, very well.
Yes.
And that calling was working directly with
Yeah.
children
Hi.
who are undergoing severe
Meditation.
medical issues.
Yes.
Okay. And you knowing Brenda and her opening enough to
No
talk to you
detention.
about work and on those Christmas Eves that she thought it was important, she recognized some of the struggles that these children were
Well.
going through.
Yes.
Their anxiety, their depression.
Yes.
So stay. Well,
And you also mentioned that at some point on March 3rd, that Brenda called you that morning.
Yes.
And she was talking about, hey, spring break's coming. Sydney's going to come home. We're going to go shopping. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you were invited to that.
Yes.
During that conversation, Brenda, she didn't know that Sydney was unenrolled at Mount Union.
I'm sorry, what?
Brenda didn't know that Sydney was unenrolled.
I don't believe she did, no.
And Brenda didn't know that Miss Powell, that Sydney was on probation a year ago, that she was struggling with those grades.
She didn't seem to know that, but she did know that something was going on with Sydney.
And you mentioned that at some point, this is, I'm guessing 12 or 13 days after March 3rd, after the murder took place, that Miss Powell was able to leave the hospital and leave the jail. And you supported that bond
Absolutely.
decision. Okay. And immediately Miss Powell is living with you.
Yes.
Okay. And you stated that after her release from the hospital, she started to take medication. But that medication originally was having a pretty strong effect on her.
The medication that she was taking originally is what was prescribed at her discharge from the hospital.
Okay. And you told, sorry, real quick.
Go
You
ahead.
told Attorney McLaughlin that she seemed a little down while she was on it, a little withdrawn.
Yes, I guess that would work for the discussion.
And then they were able to change her medication in order to better help her so she had more life to her. Is that correct? You said sparkle in her eye or something?
I think some of it was getting her body to adjust, and some of it was after she went to Dr. 𝗪𝗏. He added and subtracted and did what he needed to do to get her on the right dosages.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Brown. And Ms. Brown, you've been here.
stabbed
most
her
of the trial,
mother
that's
30
correct?
times in
Yes.
the throat.
Sat here with Sydney's family.
Yes.
You love Miss Sydney Powell, is that correct?
Well, yes, I do.
Since the moment she was released from the hospital, she's been with you.
Yes.
She's been at your 100-acre farm. She's had access to the horses and the dogs that are there at the house.
Yes.
She's worked for you there at the farm.
Yes.
And she's engaged. You take her to her appointments.
Her appointments, she handles, her doctor appointments, she handles on her own.
Okay, but originally you've been with her since March
Right.
16th through even March 3rd. You were there looking
No
for her at the hospital.
detention for
Right.
you guys
So there
right
is
now.
absolutely no
If
doubt.
you're late
that
on the
you love
vertical, you
Sydney
get
Powell.
detention.
That's correct.
You get spanking. Just kidding. Oops. Oh no. No, I gotta stop myself. Okay, so grandmother testifies. Grandmammy is all for it. She supports her. The family supports her. The dad thinks that Sydney should be out. They think that she suffered a mental health illness. So the whole family, aside from Brenda Powell, who is unalived, thinks that she is innocent and has suffered a mental health issue. Hello, Ajem. Good to see you. Good to see you, my love. We might like it. Oh, you want to speak in? All right. Okay. One more video. We have the teacher testifying. It's not that long. And then we'll have another live schedule. A true crime live, but we might just go on to do a vertical. We'll see. Let me share my screen. Sharing is caring. I'll share. Okay. Wait, hold on. Oh no, I need to get it together. Okay, cool. Got it.
All right.
Don't come for
Ms.
me.
Milligan, if you'll come forward.
Don't come for me.
Dominique.
Don't come for me. Make sure you hit that like button. Thank you for being here. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate all of you. This is the teacher at the university. We're going to watch her testify. It's shorter than what we just saw grandma testify. And then after that, we'll move on. Okay, we'll move on. You guys down? Okay, good.
Get to the chair if you'll remain
Glad we
standing,
can
please.
work this out. Let's work this relationship out.
I need to first ask
I
you
like
if you
it.
consent to being audio and video recorded. Pardon me? Okay, all right. Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear
back.
or affirm that you'll tell
Not
the
a
truth,
spanky.
the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the proceedings before the court today? Thank you. Go ahead and have a seat. Be careful of that microphone. It will catch you. And then you have to be really close to
Who
it to
wants
be
to
heard.
speak in? Okay, this is the teacher.
Very good. Thank you,
Finish
sir.
this live and then.
Mrs. Milligan, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Could you just introduce yourself to the jury, and if you could, for the record, spell your first name and your last name?
Hi, my name is Catherine Milligan, Kathryn, last name Milligan.
And Mrs. Milligan, what do you do?
I'm a high school English
You're
teacher.
back. Thank you,
And you
Sarah. I
taught
appreciate you.
at St. Vincent, St. Mary High School here in Akron?
I did.
like
I
spicy
did
noise.
for 8 years.
Take that back. Take
And
it.
what did you teach English there?
I taught English and some English electives, yes.
Do you know Sydney Powell here in the courtroom?
I do.
And I think we've heard previously that Sydney was a student at St. V from 2014 through 2018. Does that sound about right?
That does sound right, yes.
Okay. And the jury has heard from some witnesses, or at least heard their name: Amanda Brown, Lauren Curry, Aaron Dempsey. Do you know who those folks are?
I do. Those are friends of Sydney's.
Were they also students at St.
They
V
were students at St. V, yes,
at the same time as Sydney?
at the same time as Sydney, in the same grade as Sydney,
So they all graduated in 2018.
yes.
And could you tell the jury, do you remember having Sydney as a student?
Absolutely, yes.
What years and what subject do you remember having Sydney as a student?
So I taught Sydney during her sophomore year for English. So that would be a full year course. Junior year was a full year course. And then she took an elective with me her senior year, and that was a semester course.
Okay, I'm going to just show you and the jury what I've marked as Defense Exhibit R. Can you tell us, what is that?
You know what? I didn't bring my reading glasses.
Oh, that's
Can I
okay.
grab those? They're right there in my purse. Can I grab those?
Sure.
Okay. Or my husband can hand them to you if you want.
Who wants to speak in?
Well, I mean, but can I? How bad are yours? Let's see.
bad.
Okay. So that's from the Kairos Religious Retreat.
Okay, what is a Kairos religious retreat? Can you tell the jury?
So it's a retreat that the students voluntarily sign up and go on, and it's when they talk about God. Certainly, it's a Catholic school. They talk about their faith. They talk about relationships with each other, with their families, and really it's designed to help them grow their faith is the purpose, the overriding
We noticed at the previous testimonies where she like covers her face every time they talk about the grades, right? Like she's panicking
mission of the
in the whole
retreat.
grade conversation.
And what
up.
was your
And the lies.
involvement in that
The
religious
lies.
retreat
The
when Sydney was a
lies.
student, if you remember?
So I was one of the adult chaperones at the retreat. So I was there as a leader, as a mentor. I gave a talk one day, as all of the leaders did, and I was there mostly to help the students, listen to the students, help run some activities, but mostly just be a presence there at the retreat as one of the adults.
And do you remember Sydney participating in that retreat?
Yes, I do.
Do you remember what her role was there?
I believe she was a student, one of the students attending the retreat. I don't recall if she was one of the 𝗂𝗄𝗃 leaders. I don't recall that. But she certainly attended the retreat with her friends and participated in all the events and the small groups and the large groups and the activities.
And I'm gonna just show you in the jury defense exhibit S, as in Sam. Do you recognize what that photograph is?
That photograph was taken. There was a prayer walk that the students went on. Obviously, it was in the winter. I believe it was January. And the students would go on a prayer walk. It was a time for them to reflect, pray, and the students were out walking. So Sydney has a hat on. It's kind of blocked, but she is the second person with, oh, there we go. Okay. Yeah. So you can see her name on her Letterman jacket, her soccer Letterman jacket. So she's the person, the second on the left-hand side.
And it looks like maybe to Sydney's left would perhaps be Lauren Curry.
Yes.
Yes,
The
that was
teacher.
Lauren Curry.
The university teacher.
Thank you. And
And you have to remember, she pretended to be a student enrolled on the campus for like 4 months. She pretended to be a student. This plays into the crime.
you remember Sydney playing soccer during her time at St. D?
I do.
Talk about ski
4
club
months.
at
You're gonna
St. D.
pretend. We see it all the time on here.
I
Call them
was
fake ass
the
hubs,
faculty
but
advisor
you're
for the ski club. Every week during the winter session, we would go to Brandywine or Boston Mills, one of the two local places. And then occasionally there would be trips to New York. So I chaperoned a trip to New York. It was either Peak and Peak or Holiday Valley. I don't recall which one it was, but it was one of those two. And I went on that ski club retreat with the group. And Sydney was there, and she told me she didn't know how to ski. And I thought, wow, you're on this trip, and she really didn't know how to ski. And I've been skiing since I was 5. So I said, well, I'll teach you how to ski. And I did. So we went down the hill a couple times, and I taught her the basics of skiing, and it was a lot of fun. And so then she was able to join in with some of her friends after she had some, makeshift lessons.
Okay, and I'm going to show you the last photograph is defendant's exhibit T.
I mean, okay, so I did teach her, but at that moment, she did ski into a tree. So, I mean, and we joked around, and so we had a good relationship. So when she did miss a turn there, she skied into a tree, and I did snap a photo and then help her get out of the tree. I did.
Well, and that's the thing is she had a presidential scholarship. She was someone at the university. She was a sorority, like we saw it, right? She was living through the lie she ended up being expelled. That's why all of this happened allegedly, is because her parents confronted her with the fact that she had been living a lie for the last
the photo before I helped her with
I don't know,
getting out of the
9
tree.
months.
We won't tell anybody. So you spent a lot of time with Sydney Powell as a student in high school.
I did.
Can you share with the jury, what kind of student was she?
She was a good student. So she had a high GPA, and she cared about her grades. She did her work. She was conscientious. She was quiet. She was respectful, and had a lot of friends, and was a well-liked student, well-liked person, respected by the faculty.
Was Sydney
Respected by the
ever, to
faculty.
your knowledge, in trouble for fighting or arguing?
No, she was not to my knowledge.
Was she ever that kind of kid who was causing trouble, arguing with other students, causing drama, anything like that?
No, never.
And did you know Sydney to be an honest person?
Yes.
And I think the jury has heard too that Sydney's little brother Andrew graduated from
damn.
St. Pete.
He did. I had him in class his junior year, And he graduated last year, so that would have been 2 years ago, yes.
So you know Sydney, you know her brother, you have some kind of knowledge of the whole Powell family?
I do.
Not
And-
undermining it. We've talked about a lot about mental health and a standard TMI channel, but I've seen it too. I have had friends who were held up to that standard with like their parents and grades and stuff. Because the gem says, I know a girl who lied to her family about being in college. I can't imagine that would be a big lie. I have seen it before though, personally. Detention is the same word. Spinky.
What's your opinion of the Powell family?
Spinky.
I know that from what I've heard, they were a very close family. I never interacted with the whole family as a whole. I know that her family supported her in her activities. I know that they attended her soccer games. And I know that they supported her in activities. I mean, I know they sent her on a ski trip, which was extra money. So I know they supported her in things that she wanted to do.
Okay. And did you ultimately or eventually write a letter of recommendation for Sydney?
I did. I wrote a college letter of recommendation
Wow.
for her to attend Mount Union. And it was an easy letter to write. Those are easy letters to write because she was a good student. She was respectful. I knew she would succeed in college. And I remember writing, you know, I'm certain that she'll succeed at whatever school she attended. So I did write a letter. Yes, I did write a letter.
Mrs. Milligan, do you recall a time in Sydney and her friend's junior year where Sydney and I think her friend Erin Dempsey came to your class?
I do.
Can you tell the jury what you recall about that?
I didn't have a class, so it must have been when I had a planning period and I was alone in my room and the two of them came in and Sydney was crying. And she was, I would say, distraught.
Oh, I brought
And,
this up in the first
I
slide.
said, you know, what's wrong? And she said that she had a test, or I think it was a presentation for a chemistry class. And she said, I can't see the numbers.
Yeah, I brought
said,
this up in the first
What do
slide.
you mean you can't see the numbers? She's like, I can't see the numbers. I can't present. I can't see what's in front of me. And I said, okay. I said, you know, how can I help you? What do you want me to do? And I mean, she was really upset. She was pretty upset about it. So I said, well, what do you want me to do? Do you want to go down and talk to the teacher or do you want me to? And she asked me to go. So I went down and I talked to our teacher and I said, look, Sydney's really upset. She says she can't see the numbers. She's asking if she could take the test on another day. And the teacher said, yes, of course. And so I went up and told Sydney and so I assumed she took the test on another day. I wasn't the person in charge of that test.
Okay. And just the last question. Can you know why we're here today?
I do.
Why Sydney's here today. Could you just share with the jury, what was your just initial reaction?
Don't be
when you heard that
confused if
Sydney
you're
had been
confused.
charged with this offense?
I was stuck.
Okay. Mrs. Milligan, I don't have any further questions. Thank you, ma'am. There might be some questions from the prosecutor.
Okay.
If you're confused, don't be. Go back and watch part 1 through 3. We covered the body cam footage, crime scene photos. I did a deep dive and we've been covering all the testimonies. So don't feel like you're not understanding what's going on. She did brutally murder her mother and it does involve mental health and it's very much real. We're not minimizing that here. We're not. We believe in that. We're supportive of mental health here.
Yes, Your Honor.
It's a safe space.
Hi, Mrs. Milligan.
Safe space.
Hi, my name is Joe McLeese. I'm one of the prosecutors here for the state.
I will not
And I
allow
just have
it.
a
The
few
bullshit.
questions for you, okay?
Okay.
Okay, I know the jury's heard me say this a lot.
I will
but
not.
If I say something that you can't understand or you can't hear me, just let me know, okay?
Okay.
All right, thank you. How long have you been a teacher, Mrs. Milligan?
So this is my 9th year of teaching.
9th year?
Yes.
Okay. And you said English classes at the high school level.
Correct. Yes.
So it's been a long time for me, but that would include like readings through Romeo and Juliet, The Crucible, Macbeth, that type of stuff?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. And that would also be coupled with examinations, presentations, reading groups, homework, take-home assignments, writing.
Sure. Yes, of course.
And you've had the opportunity in 9 years to teach and work with quite a few students.
Yes.
Yes. And in your experience, is it fair to say that you've noticed different types of personalities and different mental health stressors that all types of students have?
Sure. Yes.
You've recognized in your career that some students have test anxiety or presentation anxieties.
I know that that is a condition that exists. I'm certainly not an expert on it, but yes, I know that that exists, certainly.
Absolutely. And I'm not going to ask you to give an expert opinion on any type of mental health issue. But based on your experience as a teacher, you've seen that sometimes high school projects can catch up to students, the homeworks, the workloads. Is that fair?
The academic
Yeah, that's
pressure, yeah, we saw it.
And
We
you
saw
as a
it.
teacher, you try to recognize those issues and as needed, try to help them out, just like you did for Ms.
parents are
Powell when
supportive.
she was struggling with that presentation.
Yes.
Okay. And you also had the opportunity specifically to work with Ms. Powell as part of that religious retreat.
Yes.
So it's fair to say, and I know Attorney McLaughlin addressed this, you had a pretty connected relationship with Ms. Powell and some of her friends.
Yes, I did.
And is it fair to say you've taught the high school level that these high school age is 14 to 17, 14 to 18? Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. And we all know that at that age, things can be a little bit overwhelming.
At times, certainly, yes.
Absolutely. And that would include things outside of school, like whether it's their friends or their boyfriends or their girlfriends or family issues, stuff like that.
Yes.
Okay. And sometimes those emotions and those stressors, they can interrupt a student's flow day to day.
They can interrupt anybody's flow day to day.
Absolutely. You can also agree at age 14, 16, 17, 18, some students don't have the tools that maybe an adult has later in life where you can manage that stress.
Right.
And based on your experience as a teacher, you've seen different types of students, those who are shy, those who are outgoing, those with a lot of friends. I know that's a kind of a heavy-handed question there. So let me slow down. Sorry. You've seen students who are a little bit more shy.
Yes.
Maybe
How
isolate
close she
themselves
was to
because
the
they're a little
teachers,
bit
though.
nervous of making
Think
friends.
about that
Sure.
relationship in the campus.
You've seen students
the
afraid
lies,
to
the
be
murder.
embarrassed at times.
Yes.
Okay. And you've seen other students who are great with making friends and keeping their social life up to date.
I have, yes.
And just previously, you testified that Miss Sydney Powell, she had a good group of friends.
She did.
That generally
She
she was
does,
a little bit quiet, but within that group, we've heard from other testimony that she was bubbly and a good friend to everybody.
Yes.
Okay.
And you knew Miss Powell for 3 years, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
3 years.
And Miss Powell trusts you enough that she went to you to write her college recommendation.
Yes.
Okay. And you've wrote other recommendations for other students in the past
I have.
as well.
Yes.
You indicated that Miss Powell was, we've
I did
seen
file
her
FOIA
transcripts from St.
for
V.
her,
We've heard
so-
from her friends and her family. She was a great student at St. V.
That's true.
Good GPA. She got her work done.
Yes.
Okay. She was a people pleaser. I think you told Dr.
Might have
Reardon.
that tea soon.
Yes.
Okay. Didn't want to let people down.
I don't know.
Oh, that's okay. I'm sorry. If you don't know that, that's absolutely fine. I'm not trying to trick you or anything.
Okay.
And you had the opportunity at some point, you met Dr. Reardon.
I talked to him on the phone.
Talked to him on the phone.
I
I'm
never
sorry.
met him in
Okay.
person.
So you guys did have a conversation on the phone.
Yes.
And he brought up, if you recalled, an
I agree.
incident in Miss Powell's junior year where she had somewhat of a panic attack.
I agree.
Yes.
Okay. And when he brought that up, that recalled your memory of that incident?
Yes, it did.
And so her junior year, that would have been, I'm not very good at math, so somewhere around 6 years ago,
Yeah.
2017 maybe?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Okay, thank you. And you described with Attorney McLaughlin that she seemed distraught, she seemed kind of panicked, and she couldn't read the numbers.
That's what she told me. Yes.
Okay. And you've seen other students have nerves when it comes to presenting in front of a class, is that correct?
I have. No one's ever told me they couldn't read the numbers, but certainly I've seen people be panicked. Yes.
I agree, Pantera.
I've never
And-
heard that somebody couldn't read the numbers.
Okay, so that stood out to you a little bit.
It did.
And you helped Ms. Powell by talking to that teacher and getting it situated.
Yes.
And as far as you know, in the end, Ms. Powell was able to work through whatever that was. We know her grades were very good. She clearly was able to get through that situation.
I don't know. I assume so, but I certainly don't know.
It never came back and there was a secondary issue with the numbers or anything like that?
Not that she discussed with me. But I wasn't her teacher for that, so I can't conclusively say. But
Absolutely. Yeah, that
So
wasn't
she's
your
not
class.
crying.
it was not my
Right,
class.
testifying.
That day when she came to you,
It could be normal.
you didn't
Doesn't
call
have the
the
same connection
St. V
with her dad.
administrators to report what was going on.
No, that would not be inappropriate. I mean, things like that, no. That would not be a reason to call an administrator, no.
Okay, you didn't have Sydney go down or Ms. Powell go down and talk
I
to
agree,
the school
Sarah. This
counselor?
was a great witness.
I don't recall what happened after I told her that she didn't have to take the test, so I can't tell you one way or the other what happened. I don't recall.
Do you recall if you spoke with Ms. Powell's parents that day regarding her stressors with that class?
I don't recall.
But that was something that you were able to work with her and get it handled?
Yes.
Okay.
It seems like she
And
was close to her
Mrs.
teachers
Milligan,
and stuff, so
around that time or in your years with
I feel
Ms.
like
Powell,
it is
she never
important.
reported to you any auditory hallucinations?
She did not.
She never reported?
Other than not being able to see the numbers. I don't know where that
Oh,
falls.
thank you. Yeah. And I guess with the second question, maybe the same answer, she never reported any visual hallucinations?
Again, like where does that fall? Not being able to see the numbers. I'm not an expert on this, but she did tell me she couldn't see the numbers.
Thank you.
I don't know where that falls in there.
You can't recall any situation where you found Ms. Powell somewhere in the school where she shouldn't have been and she couldn't remember why she was there?
I don't recall that, no.
You don't recall in your classes with Ms. Powell any moment where she seemed to black out?
That she blacked out.
that's the thing is like this whole case is like question mark, right? But she's gonna be let out. I do think she's gonna get either a plea deal. I think she's gonna be in a mental health facility and then essentially let out. Or maybe not. Maybe she won't get parole. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll get a second trial. Will it be a bench trial? What do you think? Will the jury agree as the first time around? You know, it's not always the same when you get a second trial, and we hardly see that in true crime. It's very rare. You're like a real true crime junkie, and we cover all the true
No,
crime here.
I would say no.
We don't see that
I think I
often,
would-
like a retrial.
Mrs. Milligan, as a teacher, you're what the law would
Very
refer to as,
interesting.
and I'm sorry if I say this wrong, but you would be required to report anything that caught
Hello,
your
Amanda.
attention, specifically
Hey,
with
my
a
love.
student and legal issues or serious health issues.
Well, mandated reporter is for child abuse, neglect, and things like that. I don't believe a teacher's, I think you're talking about something different. I think mandated reporting is for child abuse and neglect.
Okay, thank you for helping me understand that. So let me ask you this, Mrs. Milligan, there was nothing in your experience with Miss Sydney Powell that caught your attention enough to report to her parents about her behavior or to school administration?
I did not report anything to school administration or her parents, no.
So there you go. You heard it. She was a great student. She was captain of their soccer team. She was in a sorority. She pretended for 4 months to live like she was on campus. It's rough. It's a rough one. It's a rough case. It involves mental health. And so we're going to be open-minded, right? Let's be nice. Let's be open-minded. The crime is brutal, and I think the crime scene photos prove that. But I do also want to be open-minded to the whole mental health aspect of it, right? So this is part 4 tonight. And so we have about 3 more parts on the Sydney Powell stuff. But again, we might see a trial for her in 2025, or we might get a plea deal. And so I'm going to end this live on Sydney Powell, but I hope to see you on the next one. We're going to be covering more Jimmy calls tonight. We're going to do a vertical. I think we're going to talk. Yeah, let's talk. Let's have a little conversation. Let's have a little conversation about the trolls, the email I got. It's going to be a little one-on-one. So if you're not a member already, please become one. It's members only. Sorry, verticals are only members only. But I hope to see you there, and thank you for being here tonight. We will be covering Jared case tomorrow, and we will continue Sydney Powell tomorrow. So I hope to see you there. Please make sure you hit the like button. Thank you so much for being here, all of you who have been here tonight and participating in the conversation. I hope to see you guys soon in just a little bit. So with that being said, make sure you hit the like button, and I will see you on the next one.